hear me? Looks like you're already streaming. Go live. Okay. So I hope you can hear me, and we're going to get started. I'm fooling around with this thing, trying to understand what I don't necessarily understand. But I was trying to make this a better experience for you all and help you see me, help you see how this is all working out on my back end. Hello? Okay, audio works. Good morning. All right. So what I'm going to do here is see if I can answer whatever questions you might have for me. And I try to do this just for patrons and members of the YouTube channel. I never set out to create a membership thing, but I try to push people over to become patrons in self-defense. Like, okay, at least I know that they'll be there. And then once I did that, some like people actually I put out tears going, oh, maybe some people will join, and you did. And I was like deeply moved that people would care enough to do that. And then people would ask, well, I'm not on Patreon, so can you do the membership on YouTube, which isn't nearly as big, but sure, I could set that up, but I want to do the same for there. So, but what I want to do for you is I want to answer your questions. You stepped up for me. I want to be able to give back and be helpful to you, answer whatever questions you have. So I'll just start working out through your questions here. So first thing here, and I'll just go to the last one. So when you put a question in, cut and paste it, and then what I'll, if I miss it somehow, I will come back to it. So Prof, can you fill out a little more what support for the proposed contractors are going to provide Ukraine? I don't know. I would imagine it would be very similar to contractors in Iraq or Afghanistan who are working for a U.S. company, mostly former military, who are, providing some technical expertise, maybe some security, but I don't think that they're going to be involved in the same way as, like a paramilitary group, as much as technical support, maybe some training, those kind of things. That's my understanding from the bit that I've read, but I've not read a lot about this, frankly. Okay. What other questions can I answer for you? Because I'm looking at this going, I'm now more of the opinion than I've been for some time that we're looking at a war of attrition. I don't see any big, like last year, was it last year? Not last summer, but the year before, when they had that big sweep and pushed the Russians out of the north and all the way back to where they are now, and we're not going to see anything big like that anytime soon, to my mind. Oh, Steve Rose, do you think that replacement of Shoigu with Bellousov is the equivalent of bringing in Albert Speer? I'm not sure what to make of it yet. I know that Shoigu is not that bright. He is Putin's pal, and he was there only because he's Putin's pal. It's not because of any meritocracy. And he wasn't performing, which you generally don't perform very well in a authoritarian system, because loyalty is more important than competence. Bellousov is there to regulate it, but I'm not sure if he's there to make the trains run on time or remove corruption or both or more than or exactly what. But it's very different with Bellousov. He is not part of the system, and generally this is true in all management, right? Generally the person that created the system is going to be the last person to want to change the system, to fix it if it's broken, because they created it, they like it the way it was. And so Bellousov is being brought in from out as an outsider in order to fix it, but how fix it, I'm not exactly sure. Kevin Delaney asked, I'm very curious about a few things. Geopolitics, will Ukraine suffer from support fatigue from EU nations, NATO nations, and the US under whichever candidate wins in November? It's very likely. I mean, we've talked about support fatigue for some time now. Um, I don't know what's going to happen in the fall. I think uh, Trump is more likely after the debate, and I don't know that that means that he's going to win or anything, but if Trump wins, things will change pretty significantly. If Biden or whoever else Biden might replace Biden wins, then I think you'll see a consistent slow walking support. But Trump's really a wild card. But the fatigue is there in some places. Okay, so it's not just fatigue. There's two strands of support. The first strand is a punish Russia, win the war, settle for peace. The second is a we need peace. Don't punish Russia. We just need peace. And they're the crowd that's most sympathetic to Russia, and that's always been there. And it's stronger the further you are, except for the UK, the further you are away um, from the Russian border and further south, it tends to be more in that second strand. And the closer you are, except for the UK, the closer you are to the Russian border, the more it's the first track. I don't know what's going to happen, but we are going to see. Man, that is a good question. If we don't see movement one way or another, we may very well see some more fatigue. Okay, Techronius. Is it time for pro-Ukraine media influencers to begin engaging the MAGA movement rather than continuing to attack them? A variant of the old catching flies with honey rather than vinegar deal. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you're doing any favors. You're not exactly winning friends and influencing people by cursing the other side that you don't like. Um, I don't support MAGA, but at least when you hear it from me, I'm making an argument about, hey, would you remember, like, you're a Republican, remember Reagan? Like, what would he do? That's different than saying, oh, these MAGA people, they hate America. They're gonna, it's gonna be a like. It's just hyperbolic. It's overblown when people are saying things like, this will be, it'll be an authoritarian state. Like, just calm down. The institutions are very strong. I so and it's normal for people to not like people on the other side, but you need to listen to people on the other side and hear what they have to say and process it. And yeah. Um, but MAGA also, just like progressives on the left, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to engage. You have a fundamentally different disposition. Yesterday, I did a video with ATP Geopolitics, Johnny Pierce. And I would consider Johnny a friend, but we're very, very different. But we get along because we have a fundamental disposition to listen to each other. We're cut out of the old style of politics, where even though he is far on the left and I'm pretty far on the right, I still want to hear him and say, here's why that's wrong. And he still wants to hear me and say, well, here's why that would be wrong. And we listen to each other politely. And that's a very different place to be than in a MAGA or a progressive. I just want to tear that down and rebuild in my image, and I don't want to work with those guys across the aisle. It's very, very different. Okay, what other questions do you all have? Extremes are bad, whether left or right. Yeah, they tend to be. And I'm not a moderate either, but you got to be willing to be humble enough to recognize that you don't understand everything. You can learn from the other side. The other side keeps you accountable. The other side, even if they are wrong, may mean well. And so, yeah, you got to think through that kind of thing. Jonathan McElravy, I'm on vacation with a MAGA rich crowd. Oh, okay. Well, it'd be interesting to hear how they're processing what's going on here. I think So we pay close attention to this, but I think much of the country, even MAGA, doesn't really necessarily pay a lot of attention to what's going on in Ukraine, which is sad because like people are dying, suffering every day, and we're just like, okay, guys, this is important, and but it's not even on the radar. Alex asks, what do you think on this scenario for Ukraine to lose? Can it be prevented? Big cities are made unlivable due to intense bombings. Ukraine bleeds people. Wait, hold on. Ukraine bleeds people in millions and accepts peace conditions. I think it can be prevented. I think the winter is going to be brutal, um, because and Putin knows that. That's why he's destroying all the electrical infrastructure. He's trying to set conditions to make the people try to revolt. I think you only harden their hands, and I'll come back to that in a minute when I'm going to read these other questions first, and then I'll something's processing here. I'm trying to think of an example of what I mean by hardening rather than causing them to do, to rebel against the Kiev regime. When the WAF began, when the war began, okay, there was a lot of talk about the oligarchs having control of Russia and could remove Putin if the war fails. Why haven't we heard from them with sanctions and seizing assets? Well, there's one school of thought. I was talking to a friend who's an economist who said that the sanctions were actually a really bad idea because you're going after the oligarchs, right? But if you wanted to strengthen those that could oppose Putin, you're actually weakening the people, the very people that could oppose Putin. I don't know if that's exactly correct or not. I'm just relaying that conversation. I thought, well, that's an interesting argument. Because we've seized Russian oligarch assets largely. Like it's not Putin's money that we've seized. We've seized those of the oligarchs. So we've actually perhaps weakened them. And no, the oligarchs have to be really sure if they're going to take him out that they're going to take him out. I mean, like they can't miss because if you swing and you miss, you're in trouble. You're going to a hotel balcony somewhere, and that's bad. Paul Smalzer, it's being intellectually honest, something sorely lacking in society. Yeah, that's right. And you have to think through things and recognize, and with genuine humility. I don't mean like, oh, look how humble. I mean, you have to say, I don't know everything. Maybe you know something I don't know, and maybe if I listen to you, I'll learn something, and maybe it'll even improve my own position of how I think about things. But you have to think in those kind of terms. Russia loses not by not winning. Ukraine wins by not losing. Hold on, let me think about that. Russia loses by not winning. That's right. They have to make more gains, and Ukraine wins by not lose. That's right. Ukraine, but they still need to show more than they have. They have to start to eventually take stuff back. But right, so far, and for the 3 week operation, we're on day what 860 something at this point of a 3 week operation. So oddly, this is John McElravy again. Oddly, they are Ukraine topic numb. They just don't want to spend money on foreign countries. And that's right, they don't. And part of the reason is because they've been sold this line about how this isn't our problem. But it can and will be your problem if it gets bigger. So while I'm not going to say it's a molehill, but before it becomes a mountain, you want to address it sooner rather than later. And I understand why they don't, because they're just not seeing the importance of it. Do you think that forced conscription in Russia will trigger a power struggle? I think they'll do it very quietly. I think it's only a matter of time before you have North Korean or maybe some African forces on the ground in some strength. Putin will do whatever he can to buy the military force that he needs in order to get there. He will tick off his population as little as possible, or take people from rural areas where it's a good deal, because economically it is a very good deal to join the military in the most impoverished parts of Russia, and he'll continue to work down that method before he rouses the population. I have a very pessimistic view of the Russian people rising up to overthrow Putin. I just don't see that happening. Vlad Vexler has been useful and instrumental in my thinking on that, because I was thinking like an American, like, hey, we wouldn't put up with this, but the Russian people don't think in these same kind of terms. So yeah, that's where we are there. Um, Lone Nguyen says, how can we respond about Tucker Carlson offer interview with Zelensky? Yeah, I've had a number of people that have reached out to me after I said I think it's a bad idea for him to go to Tucker. Tucker's proven himself to be a stooge of Putin, somebody who loves Putin, says, I want Russia to win. Like, he said that on Fox News way back when. Um, and so why would you give him extra air? Why would you give, like, even if he was just asking a question and letting Zelensky talk, if you really wanted to do something, if you wanted to give fair time, you should say, okay, I'll send you a videotape and you can show it on your show, unedited, of what I have said. But to let him into the room, to give him, find find another person of a similar stature who could communicate might be a better plan. But I don't know. I just think it's too problematic to my mind. Anyway, I could live, Debbie says, hi Debbie, I could live with a common sense Republican president. Cheney and McCain are two that have had common sense. They cared about this country. Trump doesn't and is in it for himself. Sure he is. Trump is about Trump, and he wraps himself in a flag in order to get there. I think it's a bad thing for the party, and I'm a Republican, right? Like, it's a long way from where Mitt Romney was just 12 years ago. 12 years ago, was it? Yeah. And just the contrast is stark. Paul Smalzer, Ukraine is missing an important piece of Western NATO military strategy, air superiority, or at least parity, before they can make serious gains. That's exactly right. And so what they need are two things. They need the F-16s, and they need enough of them that they can have air parity, and they can back the Russians up so that they're not getting close and being able to do um, the bombing where they convert bombs into with little wings. I'm trying to remember the name now. Where they can do that kind of thing. And they also need missile defense that is solid enough that these things can't keep getting through like they've gotten through. They've been doing really good at they've done very well at shooting down Shaheeds, but when it comes to Iskanders and other missiles, they're having a hard time, and they need the air defense to be bolstered so that this stops happening. Once that happens, then they can actually kind of breathe and get it back on. Glide bombs, thank you. I couldn't remember, the name was escaping me, even though I have an article for today's Daily Brief queued up about how glide bombs keep getting through. I was escaping. Yeah. Okay. So did I miss anybody here? Ukraine's important. I could live with common sense. Unfortunately, most of my military. Yeah, hold on. Ukraine is missing an important. Yeah, okay. Steve Rose. Unfortunately, most of my military intelligence colleagues are against Ukraine because of domestic politics. Wow, that's really interesting. Most of your military and intelligence colleagues are against Ukraine because of domestic. So they tend to be MAGA Republican, I guess, and because of what's going on here, they don't. Yeah. In domestic politics, we have either Trump, who does not look like he's for Ukraine, but he could be a wild card, which I wouldn't want to test, right? But he could be a wild card that could actually be better than slow walking Biden. Or you have slow walking Biden, who is just, I don't want to upset the Russians. If we just don't do more, the Russians might calm down. And you got to get over that. Like, they're not going to. Okay. Semi off topic flag question. Who's the gent sketched on the Ukrainian flag over your shoulder? The folded U.S. flag over the right shoulder. No, I'm not a veteran. I was in Army ROTC in college until Clinton's military cutbacks killed my program. So that's not what that is. But the so you're asking about that's Taras Shevchenko. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. A Ukrainian poet, and he is a well-known figure who was for the sovereignty of Ukraine. And then you can't see it. It's a little out of frame. Let's see, right there is a signature, and that's by a Ukrainian sniper. This flag came from the Zero Line. Greg Terry was kind enough to send that to me. We were talking about just like early on after the Christmas fundraising thing that we did, because we created that little Christmas fundraiser, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we'll get some, some people will donate, and we're thinking maybe 10,000 will come in, and you'll be able to keep this thing rolling. And 100,000 came in a week. We're like, whoa, okay. So because we knew that there was pent up like frustration of people that really wanted to donate or give or contribute or be part of this in a more meaningful way. We just didn't see it like that. That was when we created the Amazon link and shipped a bunch of stuff. And so a couple weeks after that, I was like, hey, look, how many Ukrainian flags can you get? How many can you get to the Zero Line? Because that will be something that people would like, you just can't replicate. You can't, like, people would absolutely want to have. And so he created a fundraiser for that at first, and then was like, look, I'm going to give these away to people who have been supporting. And so that's where that came from. Okay. Flag question. Okay. Glide bombs. Yeah. I believe it's Taras Shevchenko, patriotic Ukrainian poet. That's correct. Okay, most of my military intel colleagues are pro-Ukraine. Interesting that Steve Rose is having a different experience. Huh, that is interesting that there's such a different experience there. Good morning from Anchorage, Alaska. Well, it's a little early for you up there, and a lot colder. Well, actually, right now in August, it's probably pretty pleasant. Corruption is cited repeatedly as a reason Ukraine is not ready for admission to various Western associations. Likewise, price gouging of Russian-speaking internally displaced refugees from frontline areas by Ukrainian speakers owning real estate near Poland. Any insights or suggestions for improving the corruption and bias inside Ukraine? Okay, so yeah, I did a video. I'm trying to remember when. 6 months, 9 months. No, it's more. 6 to 9 months ago. and I looked at each country that in the former Soviet Union and how corrupt they were, and it turns out the closer you were in proximity to Russia, all other things being equal, the more likely your country was to be fairly corrupt. And the further away that you were from Russia, and now it wasn't just geographical proximity, but how closely associated or tied you were to Russia still, like how Soviet mindset you were in your thinking. And I think there's something explanatory about that you are more like that. Soviet system was like very corrupt, and the more you see yourself as westernized, so it's not just geographical, but like Poland sees itself as part of the EU, part of the West, the more of a Western European mindset you have. I don't mean Western European, I mean Western or European mindset that you have, the less corrupt that your country tends to be. And I went and looked at each of these and kind of proved that out. That's been dogging them, and it keeps getting repeated by Russian media, even though Russia is far more corrupt than Ukraine. But it doesn't really matter, because there's people follow the narrative and then go with whatever the narrative says. So I mean, that's where we are with that. I was going to go back to a thought over here. Who was it that I was trying to talk? I was going to talk about I said I'm going to come back to that, and I said there was something brewing in my mind. Man, I lost it now. If you can help me remember what that was in the chat, let me know. And then any other questions that you have, pop them in there, and I'm happy to do that. Um, you might want to share what I told you about Ukraine investment. Oh, yeah. So there 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 are lots of, I'm trying to remember what it even was about Ukrainian investment, because you were talking about that there was like all kinds of opportunity for Ukrainian investment, but I can't quite remember what it was. Um, Man, I have so many things flowing through my head here. I have to actually look this up on that. Conversation about company. Yeah, and you shared that Biz Journals article about it. Tech collaboration will allow Ukrainians to implement. Yeah, I do know that Ukraine is kind of looked at as a gold mine of investment on the other side, but right now it's a trickier place to be, and there's lots of investment going into it. Um, but it's almost surreptitious, or they're trying to mask it, or I don't know. I see conflicting reports about things. Um, yeah, I want to measure my words. So some are doing what they're doing for. Yeah, the why a Malvern tech company opened up a Ukraine office in the middle of a war, and I see this is that the Biz Journals thing. Um, yeah, there's this. So, whoops. This is why a Malvern tech company opened up a Ukraine office in the middle of a war, and what's going on here during a business trip. The CEO asked how far he was from the border with Ukraine. When he heard it would take 10 hours to drive to the border, he proposed walking it instead. His colleagues thought he was crazy. Well, why does he want to go over there? Well, let's see here. Edge AI implements artificial intelligence and machine learning on edge devices in a network to help process mass amounts of data. Edge devices are endpoints to a network that collect or communicate information. Shannon knew that adding advanced edge AI engineers would enhance the industrial wireless network technology used to set up networks in places where traditional Wi-Fi is unreachable, and as tech was used in the Middle East as communications backbone for military systems. But Ukraine was a different story. They were extraordinarily impressive, both with men and women. I came away from this meeting saying, I want to hire these people. I'm just going to figure out how to do it. A few stacks of paperwork later, they did just that and opened an office in Lviv. Okay, so yeah, there's a hunger to be involved in what's going on there. And Ukrainians also happen to be really, really interesting in the way that they act, in the way that they think, the way that they improve things, the way that they're very scrappy and with a like can do kind. It's almost like I hope this doesn't bother anybody else, but if you're an American, you know what I mean by a can do attitude, right? Um, because like that's the way Americans think. Like, we're just going to make that happen, and they tend to think that way. And so I can see why they would want to be there, but you're also simultaneously in a war zone. So that has chased away lots of investment, because like getting insurance for things is going to be very hard. So you have both things simultaneously where people are very interested in that investment and very like, I don't know, that's a very dangerous place to be. Okay. Debbie asks, if you're raised in an environment where people steal, it becomes the norm. I've heard over and over it's expected. That's right. And so you have, okay, so I've been to Lithuania, Bulgaria, Romania, and even Belarus. I've been in from the late 19, well, no, from 2001 for over the next 5 years. I've been in those countries, and Lithuania multiple times. And we saw what we called the Soviet hangover, where people still had this kind of old Soviet mentality, and the younger people were breaking away from it very easily. But some older people would say things like, if we just had one good leader to lead us. No, that's not the way it works. Or they would say things that would echo a Soviet mindset, and that's right. And so the the corruption is part of that echo of the Soviet mindset, which is ironic because, you're stealing, but isn't money supposed to have disappeared with Marx? And okay, at any rate, what do you think of the scenario for Ukraine to lose? Can it be prevented? Big cities are made available intense bombings. Ukraine bleeds in millions and accepts peace. Okay, so that was the thing where I said I had something brewing, and I totally have forgotten about it, Alex. I am so sorry about that. I had this half-baked example in my head, and then it went away. Grammarly is a Ukrainian company? I did not know that. Grammarly is the bane of my existence, by the way, with accidental cheating, because they improve things and they're like, well, wouldn't you want to say it this way? Sure. And wouldn't you want to say it this way? Sure. Sure. And then by the time they're done with it, it's not even their paper, and it flags for huge AI. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just where I am as a professor. I'm not understanding how former Soviet nations like Hungary would tolerate leadership that supports Putin and his models of economics and justice. So I don't think it's because of the economics. I think Hungary is... So Putin likes to talk about his traditional values kind of thing. And so it's partly a reaction to the West. And I get that. I understand what he's doing. But it's not the same traditional values that the United States are talking about when they're talking about your average church-going Republican is not talking about the same thing that he's talking about there. And so that's very different. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it better than that. So, yeah. But now there is something else that I found really interesting, is that like East Germany is really supportive of Russia, even though East Germany was like dominated and violated by Russia for many, many years. And so there's that kind of dynamic as well. Anyway, I don't know that I have an answer. If you have an answer, put it in the chat. I'd like to hear it. Alex said the repeated questions above. I saw that. And I'm trying to remember what it was. What do you think of this? Can it be prevented? Big cities are made unavailable due to intense bombings. Ukraine bleeds, accepts peace conditions. I really wish I could remember what I was thinking, because I had this scenario half formed in my mind of an example of what something was, and then I totally have lost it now. I'm sorry. Hopefully it'll come back to me, Alex. I apologize. Jonathan McElravy's talking about drone storms are free of Western constraint. Right. Okay. So, yeah. So there are Western organizations partnering with Ukrainian companies as well. And this is really good, helping them create the... so by the way, on the backside of this, Ukraine's going to be a huge factor in military arms and technology, and because they have everything that's most cutting edge and battle tested, but having this here will allow them to do their homegrown stuff and attack with homegrown material, where if we just provide you because we don't want our American systems going to hit Russia because we're scared. Honestly, what we have been doing is we're scared of Russia. I mean, that's the reality. Putin might say something mean. We have been deterred by the Russians, by Putin, and it's very sad to see. David Wells, good evening, Professor from Lviv. Good evening. Please stay safe. Cuba is a case study in this, according to Cuban refugees on... Yeah, Cuba... Paul Smalzer, Alex, ask the average person in any of the countries that are former Soviet bloc, and most will say that they would rather die fighting than go back under Russian control. That's been my experience too. I found an interesting nuance here, is that the people that tend to be really interested in what's going on in Ukraine are people that have had experience with either the Soviet Union or post-Soviet Union early on, and or they're 50 or so or older. They don't have to be 50, but if they're of this age bracket and they've had that experience, and I have both, then they tend to be far more focused on what's going on here. I heard this from a Ukrainian speaker who wants to prevent the scenario. So sorry, Professor, I didn't mean to No, you didn't overload me. I couldn't remember what the scenario was, because I was thinking in my head, it's kind of like, and I started seeing something in my head, but then I went on to other questions and thought I would let it brew, and I got lost. Bruce, I highlighted you yesterday. Your prune thing. I hope you saw it. They were pitted against each other, and what else? It was an irregular debate or whatever. Yeah, well done with the wordplay. Ukrainians are mitigating power attacks with generators. Perhaps the can-do. Yeah, that's the kind of can-do thing that I was talking about here. And they're going to be rebuilding in a different way. Like the Washington Post, I think it was yesterday, was talking about there's a silver lining to the destruction of these large Ukrainian Soviet era energy facilities, and that they're going to have to rebuild green. Well, that's a hard way to have a silver lining. It was a little tone deaf saying that, but the reality is they're going to, and I was going to show this today, Zelensky talking about decentralizing. And part of this is that the Russians are trying to smash the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, and they're doing that for a reason, and they're trying to destroy this kind of stuff. Jake Bro was talking about this just yesterday on Decoding something. What is it? Decoding Geopolitics with Dominic Pressel. They're trying to smash it. Meanwhile, Ukraine's going after the oil depots in Russia. But at a certain point, it becomes cost prohibitive to send an Iskander missile to attack a very small power plant, where attacking a huge one is going to give a lot of bang for the buck. And I think that as they decentralize their power supply and maybe go more green, and solar, wind, whatever, it's going to be harder and harder for Russia to economically make gains. The marginal cost of this is just not going to be worth it, and it'll be harder to attack. At any rate, that's me just nerding out a little bit here. I'm sorry. I got a few questions behind as a consequence here. Power tax. Ben Hodges said that we shouldn't be afraid of Russia falling apart. Soviet Union fell apart before, and the only thing that happened, a lot of people became free. Okay. But there could be a very bad case scenario here where if there's competing warlords, let's say, it's going to be hard. You want to keep it unified at least enough to get your Ukrainian children back, get reparations, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be bothered if you said, hey, which of your countries within the prison that is Russia want to leave Russia? If you want to leave, you can have a legit vote. We'll make sure we monitor it, and you can do what you want. If you want to stay, great. If you want to leave, great. And I would imagine that there would be some that would be like, you know what, we've been kind of abused for a long time. We'd like to leave now. But you don't want it to just be like, I don't know, Road Warrior, you don't want it to just be some kind of dystopian kind of environment. We want it to hold together in the meantime, especially to get the children back. So let's see. Paul Smith, did I address everything here so far? Ben Hodges said, it also seems that the Russian border countries are more conservative, swinging more capitalism than Western Europe. That there is something to that as well. Like Poland tends to be more conservative as well. And there's going to be some infighting within Europe because Europe has gone pretty progressive, right? And so there's going to be some tension there as well. But okay, that's a lot less tension than like invasion over the border kind of tension. Ben said that we should be ready for Russia to fall apart, but shouldn't be afraid of it. What are my thoughts? Yeah, I'm not afraid of it. I just I want Ukraine to get their children back. I mean, that's a pretty low bar. Wonder if Ukraine has tapped the gas pipes running through to provide power. So it's really weird that they're still allowing some Russian energy because of a contract to pass through. It's just as it's weird that is it Norway? No, Norway. Denmark maybe, and somebody else in that neighborhood is still getting Russian liquefied natural gas. Like, why? And you're at cross purposes. Debbie asks, is it because the Russian military stole all the money and so they weren't prepared with training or equipment that helped Ukrainians in the long run? No, Debbie, that's brilliant. I mean, honestly. So we didn't, the Russians thought like we're the second army in the world, we're the biggest. Okay, you have nukes, but as far as your conventional forces, they're really not that good. And you thought that you were in much better shape, and you have X number of tanks and they're ready to go. Well, it turns out a lot of them need some significant revamping because there was lots of corruption that didn't go into the maintenance and those kind of things. And so that's really hurt Russia in a significant way. And it's a good thing that they were that corrupt. And that's why I have mixed emotions going back to Bellousov. Oh, was it about Bellousov earlier? The issue that I forgot about? I'm going to have to go back and track that after the video and try to remember where it was. So Bellousov is, I have mixed emotions about him because to the degree that he cleans up corruption, he actually makes Russia stronger, but he's wiping out a bunch of generals along the way. So I like that he's wiping out these generals and creating chaos in that process, but he's doing that in pursuit of strengthening Russia. I almost prefer that all those generals were there and still bilking the system in order to keep them ineffective. Anyway, that's just my own thought. Nothing came to my mind but okay. Kevin Delaney says, can Ukraine seriously offer territory as appeasement to Putin in exchange for peace? Ukraine was betrayed on the nuclear weapons give back, so betrayed again. Okay, so Putin's latest thing yesterday was we can have peace talks when Ukraine leaves the 4 oblasts that are now Russia. How absolutely bizarre is that? It's like somebody breaking into your house and then saying, I won't commit any more violence against your family as soon as you get out of the house that is now mine. What? How is that? Yeah. So yeah, that's what he said yesterday. Okay, Paul Smalzer, exactly, Kevin. Russia has never had a peace agreement. It hasn't broken when convenient. And that's right. They're willing to do that, and they just have a sense of like, no, this is what we do. And Tim Snyder, the Yale historian, was talking about like what Russia needs to be healthy. Russia needs to lose this imperial war so it can stop thinking that imperial wars are a good idea and actually stop and join the family of nations properly. Like, remember Imperial Japan or the imperial ambitions of Germany? Well, they've lost, and then they kind of went, not so good of an idea, and they're now playing nice with the rest of the world. Russia needs to do the same thing. And it's going to be a while before there's generational hatred between Ukraine and Russia now that didn't exist before 2014. And certainly not to the same degree as before 2022. Okay. John McElravy, using Britain's example, the attacks on London and the Blitz took the pressure off the military. Russia's been repeating Germany's error. Yeah. Oh, was that it? It was a strengthening the hand. I got it. Thank you, John. Oh, man. This has been bothering me. So what was forming in my mind was, to the degree that you do this to your population, you're actually creating a scenario where they hold on tighter. Okay, here's what I mean. And I do this with my kids because I've been into martial arts for many years. And so I'll do you remember the old Pink Panther where this guy would attack the guy? I can't remember the guy's name that would attack him. His servant or the guy that worked for him domestically, housekeeper. I don't remember what it was, but he would attack him out of the blue for nowhere and he'd have to fight him off. I'm hoping that I'm speaking to a crowd that remembers this. These were in the 70s, Peter Sellers, right? Okay. So I do this to my kids sometimes. I have a few kids and I will grab a wrist or grab them here and they'll have to do something just because I'm trying to explain to them. Cato, I thought his name was Cato. Somebody told me, no, that's the Green Hornet, but I think it was Cato here as well. Okay. So I'll grab, say, my daughter's wrist and she has to do something to break the lock and push away and whatever. Okay. So, but my kids have learned that if I grab you, if you pull away from me, when you pull away, you freeze the hand to the wrist. And that's what's happening. You actually make it stronger. Now, if you come toward me, it breaks it. Like look at how, here's the weak spot. If you break that, and then you can retreat. So when they are attacking, this is what was forming in my head. When they're attacking by trying to destroy morale, by destroying the energy infrastructure, you're only solidifying the hatred. It's kind of like, so that was the example that was I was trying to form in my head, and I forgot. So thank you for that. Okay, so it's kind of like if somebody asked about this earlier, should we be having discussion with MAGA people rather than just cursing them? Yes, because an undeserved curse does not come to rest. So if you're saying something like, hey, you're a real jerk, like, are you like going to think nicely of somebody who's calling you a real jerk? There's a difference between, I just want to understand how you're thinking about this, because here's how I'm thinking about this. How are you seeing this? And let's see where we can find some unity and come to some agreement. You'll get a lot farther with that approach than you will with the idea that, you're just a jerk and you hate the country and you're an authoritarian. Not all of them are, and most of them probably aren't. They're maybe misguided or something, but like, you'll get a lot further that way. So instead of solidifying them by making them hold on even harder, break through it instead. And okay. All right. I feel much better now that I know that I've gotten, like, I can close that window in my head. Let's see, where was it? So I think that was back to Alex's point, or somebody else's point. I don't remember. Bellousov doesn't have his own team. He's a civilian. He's not a capable manager. I don't know. Everything I've heard tells me he is a very competent guy. So he destroyed Shoigu's old team, and that's true because Shoigu had a team and he had this like umbrella of protection that Bellousov is breaking through. Bellousov is the most brilliant thing to happen right now to help Ukraine. Yes, but it's for the sake of rebuilding it, and that's what hurts my heart, right? Because if they build back stronger, I hate to see that, because I want them to be more weakened so that they're not prosecuting the war as effectively. Some of our group have been tutoring 19 and 20-year-old military cadets in English. They are quite aware that they may not live to 21. Wow, that's amazing. Tell me about this, David Wells. Your group has been tutoring 19 and 20-year-old military cadets. Can you explain more about that? Bruce, when you lack flow in Tai Chi, you lose. That's right, and that's with many martial arts, especially the soft martial arts. So when you're in the jiu-jitsu side, or judo is not exactly soft, but it still has a lot of the those kind of principles. Aikido, I've been in Aikido for many years. I got to one test below black belt, and then I met my wife, and I didn't actually get to that point because my priority shifted significantly. But I now have a lot of kids, so that worked out. Yeah, so that flow is important. But yeah, you don't want to resist. You want to work in a different way that's going to make it difficult. Okay. Some of them have had combat experience. This is David Wells, and I was told they need to talk with a psychologist due to wartime experiences. Yeah, I mean, you can only imagine. It's like a whole country full of PTSD. Like, if you want job security, get your degree in psychology and PTSD and head to Ukraine. And like, it's I'm sure terrible. Like, even children. I showed a picture of children swinging on a swings, like with the background was a bombed out burning building. Like how? Yeah. Okay. Kiran AKS says, message from Kharkiv last night. As for the reconstruction, these are the mantras and nonsense of Westerners. The fact that Russia absolutely will not give up Donbass and other regions with, I don't know, you had a 1 and then a 3, and so I don't see number 2. Do you think that Putin would back down rather than accept loss of 60 trillion resources under Kramatorsk and Mariupol seaport? I don't think Putin is planning to back down. I don't think Zelensky's planning to back down. I don't think that either of them are willing or able to, and they will lose the support of their constituency if they back down. And that's where we are. We're just at this weird impasse. Now, I think that, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear this. Well, no, you should be able to hear this. Well, let me see. Let's see if I can set the sound and make sure that the sound is right. You can still hear me, right? So I'm going to play Jake Bro yesterday, just where he thinks that we are, because I just had this queued up on a different screen. Let me pull this over here, and I think he's probably right.
It's not going to give us honest numbers.
Can you hear this?
But Ukraine will win when there's an economic or political collapse inside of Russia.
I don't know if you can hear this.
We don't know when that date will occur, but when it starts to happen, things are going to move very fast.
Did you hear that? Or were you able to hear that?
Everybody's saying that Russia's never going to collapse. Russia can't collapse. Based on historical precedents, Russia is the most likely country in the world to collapse because they've done it twice in the last 100 years.
It is something that I always tend to say, and that's very much in line with what you say, and that's that basically every war that Russia has lost was lost because their economy has fallen apart in the middle of the war, and they've lost economically rather than militarily. But I guess the other side of that is that for Ukrainians, that basically means they just have to dig in and accept that the war might also go on for a very, very long time.
Russia is doing Ukraine a favor. You know, this stupid reinvasion of the Kharkiv Oblast, and they're taking 8-1 casualties. It would be so much more difficult for Ukraine to cause these casualties if Russia was just dug in and not doing anything.
Yeah. Okay. So he's going on to a different subject, and what Zelensky said, I think, was 6-1. 8-1's a little on the higher side than what I saw, and it has been 4-1 overall for some time, generally speaking, according to Zelensky as well. Now, so but what he was saying initially was this idea that it's not going to be a military defeat, like how we have pushed them all out and we have won. There's no Russian left on our land. I don't see that that's what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is that they will fight until there is some kind of political or economic turbulent event that's going to cause the force of the war. Cause the war to, I'm sorry, they're going to fight till there's some kind of economic or political event that'll force the war to end, and that could be on either side. But I think that's likely to happen on the Russian side, where I think the Western aid and support from the EU, as they strengthen the EU, or as from NATO or from the US and other Western entities, will keep Ukraine going far longer than they otherwise could have on their own. But that's how I would imagine the war would end. And again, it's not because of a great military victory. But the military has to be there in order to hold on long enough. And it's kind of what you were saying earlier in one of the comments, to hold on long enough so that that can happen. And historically, that's been the case. But I'm not just going historically. It just seems like that's what's most likely to happen from all the factors that I can see. And it's murky. It is like I see so many conflicting pieces of the puzzle, but that is my read. And when I say that, I say this, I have no real grounds to be able to say that other than this is a gut feeling based on everything that I've been trying to read and understand and make some sense of. Okay, back to the questions here. Or do I think Putin would get that? Okay, or honey gets more flies. Bruce, you never told me if you saw that video yesterday with the prunes. Did you see that? Please let me know. Raised in the belief system, this is Kevin Delaney, and family opinions hard to break free, and independent education as late teen, young 20s is essential to challenge and change and failed politics and So that's true for all of us, Kevin. Like part of part of the reason that I think that I am so pro-Ukraine is partly because it's anti-Russia. And I recognize that. And so I try to brace against that, because I know that in my youth, while I was in Army JROTC, and let me show you this. Do I have this down here? In my youth, give me a second. Well, I gotta pull this out in order to get to that. See this? This is while I was in Army JROTC, 1990, 1991. See this? The kid right here in the center? That's me. Let's see. This kid in the center. See that? Wow, I looked a whole lot better then, didn't I? Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gerdes, right? And simultaneously, while I'm in Army JROTC, what's going on in 1990, like geopolitically? 1991, the Soviet Union's still a menace, right? And so this is happening in my thinking, in the way that I'm processing the way the world works. Gorbachev, the coup on Gorbachev in 1991 happened while I was in the car on the way to college. Then I was in Army ROTC at college for 2 years before Clinton's military cutbacks killed my program, right? So what I'm saying is I'm as much a product of this as the people that have the old Soviet hangover have on their end of this same kind of thing. And we have to check against that, because I'm like, okay, is it really that the Russians are bad, or do I just have this bias against them? And I have to brace against my own biases, but then they keep proving that they're pretty bad, right? So anyway, I was showing you that to say, like, we all have to think through these kind of things with our own belief system. So back to Kevin Delaney, raised in the belief system and family opinions, it's hard to break free. Independent education as a late teen, young 20s is essential to challenge and change of failed politics and geopolitics. We're all products of that. And this is why I feel this is part of why I feel as strongly as I do about this, that, and then experience being over in the former Soviet states, and then being of a certain age where I remember things. Like, if you're a 30-year-old, how do you don't remember it? Like, is it from a textbook? It's something that you read about. Okay, Debbie, is it true that Russia is rebuilding parts of Ukraine for Putin's people? Yes, I've read reports that there are. So the Kharkiv Human Rights Council had an article about this, about like people trying to get back to their homes in the occupied part of Ukraine in order to like hang on to their homes, which seems like a really bad idea. I'd be like, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to go over toward Lviv or somewhere else a little bit safer, take my family out of here. But because they would try to move Russians into those homes to occupy it. This is how Russia's always done it. So yes, they would seize land from the Ukrainians who previously lived there in these occupied places, houses and such, and give them to their people. And that is documentable. Well, we're in an international group studying Ukrainian language and culture. I'm here for 6 weeks. Our group is diverse with a desire to help. You know what? David, David, are you an American or European, or where are you from? Because I would imagine that when you go back, if you can create, and this is, contextual based on what kind of power resources they have, I would imagine there are plenty of people in the U.S. that would love to connect to a group that could work with Ukrainians, like English as a foreign language, that kind of thing. Love to be able to interact with those kind of people, and they just don't know how to plug in. And there's a growth field here for you. And I'm not talking about making money. I'm talking about doing something useful. Alex says, Bellousov is a good mathematician and economist in academia. He failed in all his big projects in real life as a manager. Bellousov is very big on central planning and is squashing local initiatives. Yeah, but that's because he has a very pro former Soviet mindset still, and he thinks, you mentioned even the word centralization, I think, central planning. He has a very centralizing kind of mentality to the things he does. And so it's going to succeed better than corruption and fail more than a decentralized raising people, growing your leaders up in order to be strong on their own kind of process. So he'll be better than what was, although worse than what could be, if I understand that correctly. Does that make sense, Alex? I hope that makes sense. Bruce Ingle says yes, but I don't know if that's yes to the same question that I was asking before. Kieran says yes, audible. Oh, that's when I was trying to play the Jake Bro video. By the way, I'm terrible at live streams, and so I've just been recently field testing this idea where you can actually see the screen and I can, interact with you and show other screens simultaneously. So this is a new thing to me. So yay. David Wells, it was over 20 years ago, the last time I was in Ukraine. It seems being away one generation, except for the war, the changes are positive. Yeah, and I would imagine that they're going to be on this positive trajectory. Look at where the Baltics are relative to where they were in the 90s and 2000. They're awesome. Look where Poland is now. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Bruce Ingalls, you missed a prunes video. I talked about it yesterday. I don't know if it was the 3 big stories or if it was the daily brief, but I talked about it yesterday at the end of the video. So you got to go back and check that. Kevin Delaney, agree. My youth, 16 to 29 in uniform. But then I came to understand that geopolitics was nasty, dark shadow game. Yeah, you gotta be aware of what's out there and not just my country right or wrong. There's some ugliness to what's going on. I mean, look at the ugliness of how we're not supporting Ukraine as fully as we should be because of other principles or priorities or fears or whatever. It can be pretty ugly. Bruce Ingle says, Rodney Dangerfield said that in our age, getting a little action meant the prune juice is kicking in. Okay. Chuck Shom says, retired from military intel job in 90 after 26 years watching Soviet military. I can't see how anyone would side with Russia. In my mind, they must be massively uninformed. So it's either misinformation or disinformation, but people are listening to, well, the Russians, I mean, they just don't want the Ukrainians to oppress them, or like, what? Okay. Can anyone hear? You can hear me now, right? This might have been older from back in the thing. Okay. Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer. Just read that. I just finished reading that less than a month ago. And there's a film. What's his name with the mustache that's in the westerns? There's a film, Once an Eagle. Hold on. I'm going to look that up because I now have the screen. Oh, that's cool that I can have the screen. Once an Eagle series. Sam Elliott, right? So yeah, you can find this Once an Eagle. I think I watched it on YouTube even. Once an Eagle was like a 8-part documentary, not documentary, 8-part drama series, whatever. But yeah, interesting book. I just finished, but is a relevant, good read. Used at West Point. Is it an ROTC text? I wonder. I don't know if it's an ROTC text. If it is, I'm really late in getting to it. But yeah, you really see the difference between the political schemer and somebody who's just trying to do the right thing for the right reason, at least as in serving his men. Yes, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I agree, Chuck. They're all about all they talk about is Biden. Misinformation. Tucker Carlson has a million-size audience at least. The damage Tucker did is enormous. I wonder what would have happened had Tucker weighed in on the Ukrainian side of this. I've thought about this quite a bit. I got to a point where when Tucker was still on Fox, I would like turn Fox off when Tucker came on because he was just spilling this like, where did you come from? How are you thinking this way? But Tucker has joined the MAGA kind of thinking. So, okay. So when the left has a conspiracy, it's like big bad businessmen. When the right, MAGA, has conspiracy, it's the big bad government forces that are nefariously trying to do things, and that's different. Like most conservative like Reagan conservative types like me, we're not like big into conspiracy theory kind of stuff. But it's like, ooh, which nefarious government forces are doing what? It's and if you're just not political, it's the Rothschilds and the Illuminati. So okay, at any rate, Once an Eagle, thanks. We'll check it out. It's a long book. It's really long. It took me a long time to get through, but it's interesting to see Sam's character, or Sam Elliott's character. I'm trying to remember what his name was in the book, as opposed to the politician soldier's character who's just trying to advance and become a higher and higher general. Okay, at any rate, if you have any more questions, let's get our last couple, 2 or 3 questions out, and then we'll be done. And thank you all. I hope this was helpful in just unpacking and thinking through some things. The more I look at this, the more I think there's not going to be any really big movements one way or another that's going to happen or shape things in the near term. Ukraine will get F-16s, but there's really not other big stuff coming down the pike that we're aware of. Ukraine will get hopefully some more anti-aircraft artillery, and that should kind of level the field. But as far as being able to push through in a significant way, I'm not sure what they'll be able to do until there's some kind of homegrown stuff. And by the way, they need more equipment because there's a dozen, I don't know what size groupings, brigade, battalion, whatever. There's a dozen of these groupings that just don't have the equipment to be sent in at this point. And that's a really difficult place to be. I remember there was a bumper sticker back in the 1970s that said, wouldn't it be a great day when when schools have everything that they need and the Air Force has to have a bake sale for a new fighter bomber or something like that. I'm thinking, well, now you know what that kind of day is like when you look at what's going on in Ukraine. And no, it's not a great day. It's absolutely terrible. I understand the sentiment. You want schools to have everything, but wow. Okay, last few questions here. An unfortunate byproduct of the internet is that there's a lot of money to be made by promoting conspiracy theory. That's right. There's also a lot of money to be made by putting out false information or by being angry or by, like, if you want to have a rational discussion, it's hard to find that. And there are few and far between who are trying to just be clear. Debbie, I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, if you're here because you've either been a patron or a YouTube member. Either way, I appreciate it. I mean, you all stepped up for me, and I wanted to do something to show that I appreciate you. And maybe I'll do this semi-regularly, once a month or something along those lines. I do the Zoom meeting where we can actually see each other for the highest level of our patrons. And I do that just, again, to say thank you because it was awesome that you all stepped up. Air Defense. Alex says, great to hear you, Professor. Please continue with your hard work. Have a great weekend. David Wells, for the 4th of July, a U.S. Stars and Stripes flag draped cake was made for our group. Ukrainians appreciated what we have done to help them in the war despite multiple delays for fun. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're trying, but we have our own internal politics that get in the way. There was I want to say he was a senator in the 1940s, 50s, something like that, who said he worked with Truman. I guess it was the 40s because he worked with Truman, who said that domestic politics should stop, and this is a paraphrase, at the water's edge. And that's what we've gotten wrong. Like, we can fight about all kinds of things, but our foreign policy, we should be speaking with one voice of what's good for the nation rather than trying to get political advantage from each other. Bruce Ingalls say, wow, patrons ask fewer silly questions except about Bruce. That's really true. It's rarefied space here. I don't get trolls, and so maybe I'll do more of these as we move forward. By the way, another thing, I have a Discord that I've been trying to get off the ground so that you have a place to interact with each other. And I just haven't put the time into trying to figure out how to make it work well, but I'll make that available as well. I'll send out another message with that, and hopefully we can have a place to interact for both patrons and YouTube members as well. the idea is just to have another place where it's real conversation about this, not just like this was a lot of better questions, where it's not inflamed by trolls or people asking stupid questions or things along those lines, where we can really move the conversation forward. Maybe you can flag my attention about some things, and I'll do that as well. Okay, last little bit. Enormous ongoing impact on Russia, losing best and brightest flight and hundreds of thousands of slaughtered. Yeah, that's exactly true. That's what's happening. And I hate to see it happening in Ukraine with the numbers of those that are being hurt or killed there as well. But that's the nature of war. Okay, my friends, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate your interest and the interaction, and hope to see you again in another. Alex, you just put up something else, and I have to address it now. Russia is sending convicts and dirt broke, desperate people into this fight. Ukraine is losing the best patriots. This is tragedy. You're right. That is a tragedy. For Russia, it was almost like an evil genius move. It's morally bankrupt to be doing that, and they're feeling some of the effects of that when people return home after being not just a hardened criminal, but then learning how to kill people more effectively, and then they go home and they cause more trouble. But okay, thank you for your time, folks, and I hope to see you again in another one of these